Hey crafty friends, this is Chelsea, and today's video I have a new scrapbooking workshop to share with you. So I have 3 double-page spreads. They are all travel themed, full of bright happy colors, and I'm going to be focusing on sharing some tips and tricks with you on how to create texture on your pages, as well as some embellishment clustering. This first layout is definitely focused on texture, and the other 2 are a little bit more focused on how to build some big clusters. As we go, I'm going to share some of the products that I used, as well as how you can get your hands on this workshop guide if you would like it. So I used the On The Go collection from Stampin Up. I don't have much of it left, but I wanted to show you just a little taste of it so you can see the patterns. It is bright and bold, and it's not strongly themed for a specific kind of travel. You could scrapbook a road trip, you could do trips where you're flying. There's all kinds of things that you could do. Really, the main theme throughout it is luggage. And for most trips, you are going to need some form of luggage. I also like the sort of rainbow color palette because that means it will go with all sorts of photos. Sometimes you have the perfect collection, but it's not in the right color palette for whatever colors are in your photos. So hopefully this will help you find lots of photos that can go with many of these colors. A lot of my embellishments I actually cut from the paper itself. So a lot of the paper I did cut up with my scissors. They are really simple shapes, easy to fussy cut. And I did leave like a little white border around the outside because I think that is easier. You can see I have some of the pocket cards that I already cut up. And then I even did some of the smaller images on the other patterns where they're just a little more itty bitty. But the general shapes are pretty simple, so it was easy to do. These little organizers that I use when I am cutting up pieces, I got from Dollarama in Canada, and I like them because they do stack on each other, and it's a great way to just separate all my little bits and pieces. I actually sat down first and cut a bunch of things out before I started building my clusters. So on this first 2-page layout, one of the major things I did to add texture was with an embossing folder. You can see this one right here. It kind of looks like cardboard. I love this pattern because it could be used with so many different themes. It's also very neutral, so it could be for masculine layouts, feminine layouts. It could go with all sorts of things, vintage layouts, pretty much goes with everything. Park photos, I can just think of all sorts of uses for this. It is the mini corrugated 3D embossing folder from Stampin Up. And I used it right on my pieces of white paper, and then I adhered those on to my 12 by 12 white cardstock on the background. So I have one piece here, one long piece here, and I just wanted to show you how to line it up so that you can emboss all the way along. Now, I did not get it 100% perfect, but when you're looking at on the layout, it is pretty good and you don't really notice it. So when you are working with shorter pieces, it's super easy. You just put it in the embossing folder and you run it through. Well, for these longer pieces, you're gonna have to run it through twice. So first off, what you wanna do is make sure that you have it nice and even in your folder. It does help with this very linear design. I wanna make sure that I have it lined up exactly. And I did create a piece that is a little bit longer than what I need it to be, because sometimes when you're embossing, you get some shrinkage. So if you're trying to cover a 10-inch area and you cut a 10-inch piece and you emboss it, you might end up being just a little bit short because as it bends the paper, it does shrink it a little bit. So I find it easier to cut it slightly larger, emboss it, adhere it to your page, and then just trim off with your scissors whatever is extra. So now that we have it in here, we want to make sure it's nice and straight so we can easily line up the next one. And we're just going to run it through a die cutting machine. Now, as far as your die cutting sandwich, this is what mine looks like. So I'm using a Big Shot, and I'm using just a regular multi-purpose platform. And I find the sandwich that you need changes depending on the folder. Even between the 3D folders, some of them are thicker, some of them aren't quite as thick. With this one, I found the best combination was to flip to tab number 1. and then to put in my embossing folder with my paper, and then use this specialty plate from Stampin Up. That's what it's called, is a specialty plate, and it's made for 3D embossing. And I just put it on top. I always like to make sure my folded end of the folder is going into the machine to help with the pressure so it doesn't break my folder, and to put my plate a little farther ahead so that the plates get sucked into the machine first. Now, this doesn't feel like it's doing a lot, but it's the perfect amount of pressure to emboss this without cutting the paper. So here is our first roll through on our embossing. Now, to line this up, we need to turn it around and put in the other end. And so what I'm going to do, I still have this as my top. I'm going to turn this around so that I can see what I'm doing. And I want to line up this last line where there's like that impression where it goes down. I want to line that up with the edge of my folder. And I want to try and get this as straight as I can so that my finished result is as seamless as possible. Then I'm just going to pinch those together and run it through again. And then here is our finished piece. So depending on how you can look at it, you can slightly see just a little variation, but really not at all. It does it fairly seamlessly, and once it's on your page, like I can't even see the spot at all. So it's a great way to be able to emboss pieces to use on your scrapbook pages. Some folders will be easier to line up, some will be harder, some designs don't translate as well. So you just have to play around with what you have. Now, the other way that I added texture on this page was to add tone-on-tone die cuts. Now, my original idea was just to do white on white, no inking, but I found like it got lost on the page. It needed a little oomph, a little something, and probably what I would have done is gone with 12 by 12 very light cardstock, very light, like a very light gray, like linen from Close to My Heart, if that was an option, or even just lightly inking the cardstock behind and then leave these white just so they pop a little bit. But I love layering on tone die cuts. Another way to add a little something to make them pop would be to add dimension. So pop them up over the background, and that creates such an interesting look. You can do it by stacking die cuts or using like really low foam dots, foam tape, those kinds of things. But I think this creates such a fun and interesting background. What I did was cut all the pieces, and I do have a sheet for die cutting in my guide where I let you know how many you need to cut of each size, so you don't have to figure it out. It's just spelled out for you, super easy. I like to put all my die cutting steps on one page, so you can just sit down, do all the die cutting. If they're stamping, do all the stamping all at one time instead of like doing it as you need it. So I knew I wanted the inking on these to be very soft. I didn't want it to be too harsh. And I really have two main tools that I like to use for adding ink. I'm just putting a craft mat over here. This is a nonstick surface just to protect my layouts, and I don't really feel like moving them, so we're just going to leave them here. I like to use an ink blending brush when I want a very soft effect, and I don't mind it to be spread out farther. So soft and more spread out ink, I use a blending brush. If I want it a little bit darker or very precise, I want to keep it just on the very edge of my paper, then I use the mini ink blending tool. You could also use a dauber, a sponge dauber, something like that, which gives you a little bit more precision. So pretty much all my edges on this workshop are inked with Smoky Slate. It's a really nice gray color. It can get a little intense, so you really have to be careful if you're wanting to keep it light. On my little Perennial postage shapes here, I really wanted to keep it soft. So the trick to that is working on a glass mat, a non-stick mat, something where you can work off the edge and work kind of inwards from there. So I'm actually going to start my brush with ink on it over here, not even on the paper. And then I'll start blending inwards. And this will give me a really soft application. If I were to start this right on the paper, it will be a lot more intense, which my first couple ones were because I wasn't really thinking. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to ink these edges. And then I went for it. I'm like, oh, I should back that off a little bit. So maybe I'll put this over the white so you can actually see. There you go. So you see that gives you very soft kind of blend to the edges. Now with my other papers, I want to keep it mostly around the outside edge. And I don't want this to come in very far because I don't want this looking super distressed. Flip this over so you can see the difference. See how you have, it's more like an outline. It's to distinguish the layers from each other, especially anywhere where I have pattern paper on top of pattern paper. It really helps to just define those edges so you get some visual separation without having to layer another piece. So I could add like a layer of cardstock in between here, but then I'm using even more paper. And speaking of using even more paper, I do try and, use my paper wisely. So for this one here, I did gut the middle of this big 12 by 12 tags piece. I gutted that with my paper trimmer and saved the middle part so I could do some fussy cutting out some of these little tags. And then I put this one over top and then I cut it after that. It's so much easier than trying to get everything the right measurements and lined up. Why not just stick those two pieces together and then cut it? Everything matches perfectly. Some of the stamps and dies I brought in for this page was the Tags to Go stamp set. There are some really good sayings in here that are perfect for scrapbook layouts, but you could also use them on cards. The Perennial postage dies, I've gotten so much use out of these in the last year. They are one of my go-tos, as well as the mini alphabet and the alphabet a la mode dies. So I did all my titles with combining these two ones. I like how you have the tall, skinny option with the short, kind of more rounded version. And then I wanted to bring in some more texture. So this collection actually has a pack of twine. So it's called Pack Your Bags. And it comes in 3 of the colors that are in this collection, which is really nice to have the coordinated colors. It makes things super simple. So I've used this a couple ways in this workshop. You can see I have it through my tags here, which is a pretty common way to use twine. I just punch a hole and then thread my twine through. I'm going to show you on the other pages how I did something a little bit fancier on there. And then for this one over here, I have here and here, I have like little twine nests, if you will. So I didn't want to tie them through a tag or anything, but I wanted to include twine because it's nice to repeat elements. If I have twine here, I kind of want to repeat that here and here in my 3 main embellishment clusters. So to do that, really all I do is unwind a section. You can start winding it first and then trim it or however you want to do it, but I just kind of wind it around my fingers until you get some loops, and then you can cut it, and then you can always play with this and tighten it up or, reconfigure it, pull it out different ways. And the easiest way that you can stick that on is if you have an image over top, especially that's going to be on dimensionals or foam tape, is to stick this to the back of the foam tape, squirt a little extra glue under there, and then just stick it down. So I managed to have 3 different textures in here, and you could say even a 4th because this collection actually has puffy stickers, and these are really fun. I love the dimension that they give you, and they're really fun to work with as well. The on-the-go puffy stickers, you get 2 sheets in there, so you can see I still have plenty to work with. You have arrows and little tag shapes, postage stamps, different kinds of arrows, stars, geotags. So lots of things in all the colors of this collection. All right, let's go on and look at the other pages. So this one, we are squeezing quite a few photos in here. I do like to have quite a few photos, as you noticed from my last one. But this one, I have a nice band of 4x4. Now, I do trim down my photos. So these photo placeholders say 4x4, but they have been trimmed down just a little bit to fit. So then I can either trim my photos to the exact same size and just layer them over top, or I can trim my photos down even a little bit more, so about 1/4 of an inch smaller. And then I can have a small white border with the black border behind it, which is probably what I'll end up doing because I do love a good double matted photo. Keep in mind, the photo placeholders are not in the instructions. For this first layout, I did include measurements for these because they're not double matted or anything. So there are measurements for white cardstock photo mats for layout number 1. Now, if you want to get your hands on the guide for this, I have all the cutting diagrams so you can see how to cut your paper. I have all the information on die cutting and how many pieces you need to die cut, the supply list, photos, measurements of how to place your paper on your layouts, as well as tips and tricks for putting it all together. And if you are within Canada, you can place an order on my Stampin' Up website for $80 or more before tax and shipping, and you will get the guide for free in the month of May. Another way you can get my guides for free is by joining my Crafty Hearts team. My team gets all of my guides, as well as my friend Julie Carrier. You get all her guides for free as well. So whether you want to use them for your personal use or use them to teach classes and things like that. There is a special in the month of May starting on May 6th where you can get the new demonstrator starter kit for $135 Canadian and you get $220 in value. So you get free paper pumpkin kit, get a couple of freebies in there, and then you get to choose what products you want in your kit, which I love. I think that's so much more useful than just getting a standard set of products. You can choose what you want to get, and it's a great month to join because there's a new catalog. So you get discount, you can earn Stampin' rewards, you can get all the extra bonuses of joining my team. Now, if you are not in Canada, so those first two things do not apply to you, you can also go to my website and purchase the guide directly, but that option is only available if you do not live in Canada. I will leave the link for that down below. So you can see we have some pretty big clustering going on here. Basically, I have three little groupings, but because I have these pieces here, it's kind of like tied together in almost end capping my collection of photos. So it's almost like two big clusters because everything is kind of touching and connected. You can see I did bring in some texture. So these blue pieces are embossed with that corrugated embossing folder. It's just something fun that adds a little unexpected touch to your page. And then the majority of these are all images cut from the paper collection. So what you want to keep in mind when you are building embellishment clusters is you want to start with your largest images first. For these clusters, because my icons are all on the smaller side, I started by planning what tags I wanted to use. So if you're going to build a cluster, start with the big items, start with the background items. So to build a cluster on here, just take your tags first, whether you want to have one or maybe you want to layer together a couple of different tags. Go like that. Now, I don't think I have any more luggage pieces cut out, do I? Because after you do your kind of background or your biggest pieces, then you want to go to your medium pieces or your focal points. So for me, my focal points on here are my little luggage pieces. Okay, I cut a couple out from the last little bits of paper that I have. Colors are not ideal. I'm looking for a good variation in color and sizes. I probably would have gone for like the orange backpack layered together with another one of these bags, but these are the ones that I have. So my kind of focal in the front will be this blue bag, and ideally I would like something taller back here. If you have things that are both the same height, it just looks a bit flat. Now you could fix that by putting another element in here. You could also stamp a saying in there if you want to kind of fill that in. I'm just going to turn this on its side for now, just to give me a little bit of height. And then we can fill in with even smaller images. So there's even smaller tags on some of this paper. And I can come in and I can just add in those little images. I have a little passport here. One of the pattern papers has a little map and photos and a camera. So all of those are smaller images that you can mix in to create your little cluster. Now something should, in my mind, go in here because I don't want to have just kind of a random spot. So either something stamped here or something to fill in. So I could bring in one of these little postage stamps. I could bring in a geotag or maybe even a little row of these arrows like I did on this one where you can see I have little arrows scattered around the page. I do like those in sets of 3. You can really spend a long time messing around with different options when it comes to creating clusters, But eventually you kind of have to just like go for it and try it out, see if you like it. So once you kind of have your main thing done here, I would probably stamp a little sentiment in there to fill up that empty spot. You can add some twine to your tags, and that's pretty much done. Probably a little geotag or a couple of stars scattered through. Remember, it does work really well to have like little triangles of 3. I didn't do it as much on these layouts just because there wasn't space. I had so many little pieces clustered together. So you could see like my puffy stickers, some of them, they are just one-offs. I do have 3 geotags on my whole layout though. I put one here, and one here. So each of my clusters does have a geotag. There really isn't a wrong way to do it, but by using that formula, starting with your biggest, then going down from there, you can build clusters just a little bit easier. That is also why sometimes the clusters get out of control and they get a little big because you just keep adding and you have to stop at some point. These I purposely left blank because that is where my journaling is going. Now, if I end up needing more journaling, I can always convert one of these spots to be journaling. If I end up putting photos on here that I'm going to have a really big story, I would just convert those. I could even change one of these if I printed off my journaling on the computer. These are 2x2 photo spots. I could turn one of those into a journal spot as well. Something else I wanted to mention about these titles. Now, when you're working with all these individual dies to make your title, I love to use washi tape or Post-it note tape, any kind of low tack tape. I usually always press it on my clothes or my skin to take some of the sticky off. And then I put the washi tape across my letters. I line them up on a grid mat, put the washi tape on there, put glue on the back of all my letters, and then use the tape to move it to my page. That way I get it straight, I get it exactly where I want it, and I just find it way less frustrating. Sometimes, especially with these tall, skinny ones, if I'm doing it letter by letter, I probably won't get it as straight or as even as I want to, and I find using the tape to help move it around as one word is much easier. The other thing I wanted to mention on here is the twine. So I left my twine a little bit longer, and I did just knot it through the hole like you normally would, and then I just kind of twirl it around until I think it looks kind of good. And then I go with my glue and I put little squirts of glue. This is the Barely Art glue, but you could use any glue. And I put little dots of glue under there and press it into the glue and then give it some time to dry. But that way your twine actually stays where you want it on your page, so it's not just flopping all over the place. And that's how I get my twine to sit nicely. Now, in case you were wondering where these beautiful rainbow strips came from, I stamped them. So this is a new set that is launching May 6th, and it's called Beautiful Motifs, and it has this really pretty scribble stamp. And I was looking through, I'm like, I want something that's like a stripe, a polka dot, and then I saw this scribble and I was like, that is perfect. So you don't have to have this set to make this, but it works really well if you do have this one. And basically I took all the colors that are in this collection. I took white, 1/2 inch by 12 inch strips, and I just stamped them. With Close to My Heart, we always had zip strips, and honestly, I don't mind not having to cut those off my paper and accidentally cutting my paper wrong. I did that way too many times, but sometimes I miss having those little accent strips. So I put one there and one here, and you can see like I did overlap the colors just slightly in some places, but I love how this turned out. To me, that was the one pattern that was missing out of this collection, was a good rainbow stripe. So I just went ahead and made it myself. For our final layout, I have some pretty good sized clusters here. You can see I have a couple of big tags, and then we got more luggage. Some of these are layered up with dimensionals. So this one and the bottom of this one is layered up. This one is flat. That is a great way to make your clusters more interesting too, is to pop up some of the pieces. This little camera is popped up. These items are flat. You get some dimension from the puffy stickers as well. And I think it just makes it a little bit more interesting to look at, and it helps define it from the other layers. Sometimes when you have a lot going on, there's a ton of pattern and color in here. And I think having some space, as well as those white edges that I left, help to define the individual pieces. You can see I used twine again in my tags here, but I left them shorter this time because I had a lot of other things going on and I didn't want it to get out of control. I stuck with just black for my title because I have, like I said, lots of color going on here. And then I created these little like faux stitched swirls on here, and I'm going to show you how I did that. Now I do have my main little embellishment clusters. I have a large, a medium, and a small, but I wanted some more color in this middle part of the page. It was looking real black and white. And of course, once I have my photos in here, hopefully that will add some color to it as well. But I felt like I just wanted a little pop of something. So I did do a tag under this one and a tag under this one, just to give it a little something something. This stamp is from the tags on the Go, and then I just put the puffy sticker over top of it and cut it out. And that worked really well. This just happened to fit perfectly. See, I have some puffy stars that are scattered around the page in each of my clusters. We have some nice dimension. So following the same rules here, I actually layered 2 tags because I felt like I wanted to bulk this up a little bit. It was looking a little bit boring. So the big thing on these pages are really those swirls that keep your eye moving around the page. I have a stamp set from Close to My Heart that has some of these shapes, but they weren't right for this, and I try to not use things on my workshops that you can't get. I try to keep it to just things that you can get now. If you have one of those stamp sets in your collection or something similar from another collection, you could use that, but I'll show you how I did this just with a pencil and a pen. So first off, you want to lay out all your pieces first because you want to know where your arrows need to go, and it will make more sense if all your pieces are attached first. And I do have all my arrows kind of pointing in the same direction. So it is intentionally leading your eye around the page. You can see this one over here, still pointing this way. So basically we've got a big circle going on here. You don't have to do it like that, but I thought it flowed really nicely. So once I had my photos down and I knew, where things were going to be, I'll just draw that here for you. I took a pencil and I just kind of went for it. Like that. The faster and the smoother that you can do that, the better. Try to not push too hard because you don't want to leave an imprint in your paper. You want to use a light hand, and you can go add your arrow after the fact. If you hate it, make sure you use a white eraser. You can erase it. I wouldn't try and do this step with a pen unless you do a lot of doodling and you're really confident about that. But I did all of mine first with a pencil, and just keep your hand moving. Try to be fluid with it, even if you need to practice on scrap first, just to kind of get the flow of how the pencil feels in your hand. I like to do loops, and I like to offset my loops. So like for this one, see how the loop goes up and then my next loop goes down. That is on purpose. I think my other ones, I only have one loop on each, so it doesn't really matter. But this was intentional because I think it looks a little bit better when they are offset. Same if I'm looping my twine, I try and offset those loops. Next step, you need a black or a gray pen. I use the Le Pen in this gray color. This is dark gray. But if you have the Stampin' Write markers, I only had black, not gray, and I wanted to go a little bit lighter, but you could use the bullet end. It is only slightly bigger than the pens that I used. And this is a bit of the tedious part, but once you're happy with your line, go ahead and start making little dash marks all along here. Okay, take your time. Go as slow as you need to until you get all the way around. Let your pen fully dry, make sure it's dry, and then go ahead and erase your line. And then you will end up with these fun little lines that look like they are super effortless and just kind of cutesy. And I really love how those turned out. I'm not like a super doodler. I always admire the things that Katie Taylor does because she always does all these really cute doodle marks, and I can do it, but it's better if I use a pencil first and then trace it. I hope this was super helpful for you guys. And if you want to get your hand on the guide, all the directions are down in the description. And if you want to see the other workshop guides I've created, they are still for sale on my website. And I will link the playlist here so you can check out the videos for those. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again soon.